Hi, everybody. My name is Titus or Titus for the Native American English speakers in the room. I'm originally from Romania, moved up here about 10 years ago. And I know my badge says GTM and DevRel. I recently changed my title to AI integration, and you'll see why in the second part of the presentation. We've heard a lot of super cool concepts today around security and safety and how to make your agent work the way you want it with guardrails. We believe at Civic that people have been giving agents too much power, and there should be an easy way for us to go from I want to deploy AI safely, but I don't want to do 2 weeks of work harnessing it, to I can deploy AI safely in a few minutes. And I'm going to use essentially OpenClaw example throughout the presentation, so hopefully you guys are familiar with it. But before I do that, before I go in, a rundown of what AI agents can do today. So I think you've seen a bunch of these in the previous presentations. They can run multi-step workflows. They can read and write databases. They can all make decisions based on context, with or without your approval, with or without the human in the loop. And then they can chain tools together. They can operate in swarms. They can operate in graphs now. There's a lot of flexibility baked in. And then I think the last one is the scariest one for a lot of us, is just letting it run behind the scenes while we sleep or while we do other things, or launching multiple agents in parallel and not supervising them all the time and running them 24/7. So all these can be done safely. I think that's what we believe, at least. But before I dive into the details of that, so who here has deployed their OpenClaw or similar autonomous agent before? So not a ton. So essentially, the interesting thing about it is it doesn't require a ton of setup. You don't have to have an enterprise architecture for it. You just deploy it in a EC2 or deploy it in a Droplet on DigitalOcean, deploy it in your favorite cloud or even localhost if you want, and then connect it to a channel, and then it starts doing agentic loops for you. Now, that's great because you can do a lot of these workflows without human intervention. And then depending on what you've given it permissions, it can touch your file system, it can touch APIs, it can touch MCP servers. And that can be useful to the point where it starts being destructive. And I don't know if you've seen that story with a person on X that gave OpenClaw a task saying, hey, please organize my email and delete the unnecessary ones. And it started deleting thousands of emails. And then it didn't respond to the stop command because it wasn't she wasn't telling it explicitly to stop, but rather, why are you doing this? Don't do this, without using the word stop. So stuff like that deters you from trying out things. At least deters me from trying out things right away. So I had to wait for a safer way to connect OpenClaw to my Gmail, for example, to be able to use it that way. And I'm going to show some of that later in the presentation. So I think that the idea is right now, if you give the agent your full access and full access tokens, then there's no way of blocking it from doing unintended things. If you don't limit it, again, it may do things that you don't want. You might consume tokens in a way that is not intended. Like, for example, last night I was testing some evals on a Claude Code workflow that I had built, and then it basically ran through maybe $17 of tokens just behind the scenes because it was running all the evals in parallel and improving them. I was like, that was not really my intention. Thank you. But next time, please don't consume that many tokens behind the scenes. And then in a lot of ways, the other problem is the trails, what the agent did is not immediately obvious. And for these OpenClaws or the agentic deployments, sometimes what they do is they obfuscate by dumping a lot of information on the end user. And it's like you have tons and tons of lines of output in the logs. And then you're actually looking for, I just need to know what tools were called, for what reason, and in what way, by whom. But I don't need to know all the bash commands that I ran. So those are the issues right now with AI agents. So the other issue is we commingle the AI agent with the rule system. So if you're using your AI agent to configure your rules, then it's most likely that the agent will end up reconfiguring them for you behind the scenes to get your task done, leading to those unintended consequences like deleting thousands of emails without permission. So in this case, okay, you've granted Gmail read, but if it has an auth token that's scoped beyond that, then it could also grant a forward or manage filters or other unintended consequences. So there's a data point from last year where 80% of teams with agents in production have had an incident. These rules need to be separated from the agent itself. So from our perspective, there's three things that we need to be able to determine, like who's watching the agent, who decides what the agent is doing? It can't decide for itself all the time. And then can I pull the plug, right? I think that's the big one. It's like, where are the permissions for the agent? Who controls them? And then can I revoke them if there is an issue detected along the way? So prompt level, I think we've heard it from a few people today. Prompt level instructions are suggestions. They're not things that the agent will follow 100% of the time. Nothing LLM related is 100% proof. That's why our belief is we need to separate, especially on the guardrails section, separate those away from the agent and into almost like a configurator that's separate from the agent interface. So in this case, the agent can have the prompts, right? And you can definitely prime it that way. But then if you want specific destructive behavior be blocked, that needs to be blocked at the API level. And sometimes the APIs are just not powerful enough, right? Maybe the API provider doesn't have permission level blocking. You get the full API access or no API access. What do you do in that case? You build a harness around it with an MCP server, you add guardrails to that MCP server, and that's how you have a more safe environment. And that's what we do at Civic. We can help people build that so they don't have to do it themselves. And then the other thing that you get by separating is you have the auditability itself, the revocability controlled by the human and by the rules imposed by the person behind the agent, as opposed to the agent figuring out what rules should be enforced or not. So clear example, like what happened overnight, there were 47 API calls made, 0 recorded with context, and then we don't know which tool, which call caused the problem. Without the audit trail, you need to have to basically pull the logs and start digging through those and see what happened on the server side, if you have access. Because if you don't control the API endpoint, then you might not actually have access to that. That's why I think it's important to have a auditability trail at agent level. So what does that look like? In our case, what time it happened, what service was called, what agent was calling it, and what happened. Was it done or was it blocked? And why I put blocked up here is because sometimes if your agent fails, it starts making a lot of tool calls that were blocked. It will just consume random tokens for you, and you will not get any results. So both the done and the blocked are important to track. Now, when it comes to authentication, we have auth. If you used it, it can be easy to integrate with an auth provider. Now, the problem with auth, though, is it does grant a lot of permissions in bulk. So if you want to go more granular, then you need to write custom harnesses yourself, or the agent has to be primed to understand what can it do actually for all these. So in this case, with calendar events, I want read, create, update, but not delete. With Gmail modify, I want to remove, delete, and manage filters because I only want read and send. But with drive files, I don't want to share drive files or delete them. So all of that can be configured at MCP level with some custom harnesses. So this is what happens when you do tool calls. The agent will attempt to do these things by asking, hey, what is the configuration of this MCP server at tool level? What am I allowed to do or not? And it can detect whether that tool is blocked or is restricted with a certain keyword or a certain rule. Or in more extreme cases, if you want to be completely sure that it doesn't do that action, you just remove the tool altogether. That tool doesn't get loaded in context, so that the agent never gets to even see that there's a calendar delete function. Just, hey, this doesn't exist. I don't know how to do that. So in that case, that completely protects that endpoint. So the idea with the agent being living outside, the revocation living outside the agent, is you want to make sure that the agent doesn't get plugged in after you plugged it out, especially if it caused some sort of issue. So full unplug button, that's the standard kill switch. This is a dangerous situation. Let's disconnect all the auth endpoints, all the API keys, everything, and then reconnect them one by one. And as we solve the agent, or I see, hey, I just want to disconnect this endpoint, then that's also very easy to do with a tool like ours. So because it's all very granularly scoped, it allows you to continue your task. It continues to work, but it also keeps you safe. So this is what the stack looks like if you use a connector layer like the one we built, where you run your authentication, your scopes, your audit, your revocation through a proxy, essentially, as opposed to connecting the agent independently to each and every single endpoint. because then you have to apply all of these options to the endpoints that you've connected the agent to. We believe in unifying this. You'll simplify your deployment and not have to build a lot of custom tools for every single endpoint. So our goal essentially is to enable more people to take agents in production with these controls. So go from, I just need an agent for this, to I now have an agent in production with guardrails, audit trails, and revocability built in from day one. So instead of having to essentially vibe code a new version of it or bring in a team to build that for you from scratch custom, have a set of tools that are pre-built that you can connect to and spin up your agent that way. And it comes pre-built with a lot of the MCP servers that are available out there. There's a lot of remote MCP servers that can be harnessed with the guardrails and the audit trails and the revocability functions that we've produced, so that you can get started right away. If we don't have one, it's fairly straightforward to spin up and host and harness. So what that looks like is essentially agent works across your real system, goes through requests information through the proxy, and then the agent is providing the result only after it has been filtered through the guardrails. So I'm going to show you a quick demo without sound, and I'm going to talk through it. So in this case, we're going to demonstrate the guardrails feature. So you're going to see how Civic enforces that on a Gmail example. So you'll see how we add here the Gmail MCP server, and then we're going to set permissions. So read-only access, block all sensitive information. And this is happening in a configurator agent, not in the interaction agent, like OpenClaw in this case. So this is going to be a configurator agent that's completely separated from the action agent. So you can see here, it's configuring all the guardrails for me. And then now we're going to ask it to essentially summarize my emails. And then, okay. So in this case, I'm getting blocked because it was trying to pull some sensitive information. So in this case, we're removing the guardrails for Gmail, and we should be able to see now the response from the past 48 hours. So now it got the 23 messages and it's grabbing the content, and now we can see that it was able to pull the information. So essentially, the way we integrate something like this, if you have a specific workflow that you want to spin up very quickly, you don't want to set up a ton of infrastructure, we can come in, do a little discovery, then we can build the workflow end to end, and then ship it live for you. So in that case, you don't have to think about like all of the setup and that goes with it. So if you want to see it more in action, you can go on civic.com, sign up for a free account. We give you 10,000 tokens to start with, which will be enough for 10,000 tool calls. You can configure your own agent and you can go live with, for example, a Gmail integration in 5 minutes or less, because we handle most of the auth integration for you. So we don't have to set up a new application in the Google Cloud instance to get your auth credentials. You can go through ours. We're CASA2 verified. From that perspective, it makes your job a lot easier to go live with something like this for you or your team or whoever is requesting it. So yeah, that's us.